Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tell Me About Podcast, where each week two nerdy friends deep dive random topics. I'm Laura.
And I'm Tom.
And this is our episode update show.
So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking back at some of our older episodes and doing some review and doing some updates on things that we learned after we recorded. And we're also going to be diving a little bit into some of our favorite episodes and favorite moments from the first. How many episodes have we done? Was it 26, 27?
Our last episode was episode 30.
Close. I was close. But basically, we want to give some updates on prior episodes that we did and also kind of look ahead to what we have planned in the future. So with that, let's get started.
So the first update that we wanted to do is about the Amelia Earhart episode. So in February of 2024, Deep Sea Vision, a marine robotics company based in South Carolina, found what they thought may be Amelia Earhart's plane. A 16-member crew searched about 5,200 square miles of the Pacific Ocean floor using these underwater drones that looked really cool. And they came upon this very blurry image of what they think is Earhart's Lockheed 10E Electra. Now, I have a photo of this, Tom, and I want you to tell me what you think. I'm going to warn you, it's very blurry. And we're going to put this on our socials, and you guys tell us what you think. So on the one side is the image from the bottom of the ocean, and then the other image is of her plane.
So I see the plane. I mean, the image looks like a Rorschach test. No, but I do see the plane.
So obviously it's not clear enough to distinctly say that it's her plane or it's not her plane. It just appears to be an object in that shape of her plane. So the specific location has not been disclosed, but the object is about 16,400 feet down at the bottom of the Pacific, and it's about 100 miles away from their intended destination of Howland Island, if you remember that from the episode. So for depth comparison here, the Titanic is about 12,500 feet down in the Atlantic Ocean, so this is pretty deep. This is another 4,000 feet down. So the object is not far from where Amelia and Fred lost radio communication, which says to me, if this is her plane, that it went down really fast. What do you think?
That would make sense. That's what we kind of reasoned. If it was going to happen, it happened really quickly. It would have to happen in such a way that the plane would have to sink. I'm imagining it going down in almost like a 30, 45 degree angle in order to hit the type of speed it's going to hit in order to sink. Because wouldn't a plane usually float?
Not necessarily. I think if it filled with water quickly, that it would sink. Or like you said, if you're nosediving right into the water. No, I would think, anything, if you fill it with water, it's going to sink.
Well, that's assuming that the water breached.
I mean, how could it not, though? With the impact, I'm sure that some of the windows broke.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, I'm also looking at it I'm thinking like the Miracle on the Hudson, too, when they were able to land it on the water.
That was also another, 50 years. So they had better technology.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking if the only way, again, you have to go in with speed and at an angle for it to take on water.
The Deep Sea Vision team says that they will do another dive, but they haven't said when they will do this yet. Now, I would be so anxious to get back down there. And I know these things take time to plan and put together, but I wouldn't want to wait at all. Just knowing that this could be her plane, everybody get your shit together. We're all going down there,
Party at the plane. Whatever you do, don't hire the Titan.
Well, that's not possible anymore. So there have been many underwater excursions looking for Earhart's plane, including an expedition by Robert Ballard in 2019. And he was the explorer, if you remember, that found the Titanic in 1985. None of the prior expeditions turned up any evidence of her plane. And I imagine that they were looking in a similar area. I mean, I know that it's very vast and the ocean floor is the geography. And I even think I mentioned this in the episode. The geography is very crazy and it's easy to lose things at the bottom and kind of get, sucked into these peaks and valleys and vegetation and all this crazy stuff.
If you've ever just seen a diagram of like how deep the ocean goes, you don't think something is that deep, and then you see the graphic of it and you realize it's deep. There's a reason why no one really goes down there. Not to mention, Lord knows what you find down there. I mean, there's a reason why there's so many species and aquatic life that we're just now finding because we can put cameras down there. But like, it's wild to think about. Even the Titanic is relatively shallow considering how deep some of these things go.
You're right. I don't know if it was James Cameron. I know he did make an expedition to, I forget what the spot I believe it's in the Atlantic is called. And it's like so many thousands feet down past the Titanic. It's like the lowest that anybody has ever gotten. And I think he spent like a day or two down there. And like, I can't even imagine. Like, that's so scary. So at first I was really skeptical that this was her plane. And I still am to some degree, because it seems like every few years they find something that they think was hers. Of course, I'm very interested to see the close-up images of the plane when they do go back down. And as I mentioned many times before in our podcast, like, I love this underwater footage and photos of lost ships and planes. Like, it's just so fascinating to me. Of course, I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos of when Robert Ballard found the Titanic. And it's such a dichotomy of like this historic moment when they find something that no one has set eyes on in decades. But it's also like this really deep sadness of like remembering the tragedy that brought them there.
It's bittersweet in a lot of ways.
Articles I read about this had talked about potentially raising the plane, if it is in fact hers, and preserve it in a museum. Now, I don't love this idea. There was a lot of talk about raising the Titanic too. And I understand the sentiment of wanting to bring them back on land to study them and memorialize them. But the millions of dollars that it would cost and the logistics of raising it from that far down, it really bothers me for two specific reasons. One, the plane is obviously very delicate and very fragile, especially after all this time. And you would risk damaging it or breaking it if they tried to bring it back up to the surface. And second, as I've said on our Titanic and Edmund Fitzgerald episodes, this is a graveyard and this is their final resting place. And why would you want to disturb that? Like, it just seems a bit cruel to me.
That was my thought, first of all, that it's a cemetery, essentially. And so you're really you're right, you're disturbing a gravesite when you're doing that. Secondly, quite frankly, you have no idea what is inside of it. And I'm not just talking about the gravesite. I'm also talking about like bacteria, algae. You have no idea what's inside that plane, what's been growing in there for years and years that you're now bringing up to the surface, and God knows what's going to happen.
It's funny you mention that, because the Titanic has these things called I think they call them rusticles, because it's these little like clumps of bacteria that look like rust that's just growing all over the ship at this point. And they did take a sample of this bacteria and bring it up, and they really studied it, and it was like nothing that they've ever discovered before. So I understand the scientific value of this, but I kind of get what you're saying, where it's like, but you also don't know the power of this and what it can do when it comes in contact with people with, on land with oxygen.
I mean, this is how a pandemic movie starts.
So I'll be really interested to hear when they go back down and reinvestigate this, and any other updates, we will let you guys know.
So my update is on Moneyball. And when we last spoke, the Oakland A's were in a bit of a hole where they were trying to get a new stadium built outwardly in Oakland. Well, there's an update to that. They may have a new stadium, but it's not in Oakland. We had news over, I think it was January or February, that the owners, in kind of, quite frankly, a cowardly kind of move, are trying to move the team to Las Vegas. This would actually be the third team Oakland has lost in the last 5 years. And the second one, Las Vegas, when the Raiders went about 3 or 4 years ago, actually. And the interesting part about this is that Las Vegas doesn't really seem to want them. So and I put it in chat and we'll put this up. They put out renderings for a new ballpark that I think is supposedly going to sit on 33 acres where the old Tropicana casino sat. I already see the looks from Laura. Would you like to chime in?
My first question is, why does it look like this? Yes, but why does it look like the Sydney Opera House?
Why indeed?
That's my first question. I don't know. The aesthetics of it is just, it's weird.
It doesn't fit with anything around it. The inside looks bizarre. That's a lot of friggin' clear glass to put in Las Vegas, where it's, I'm trying to think of what the technical weather term is for this.
Hot as shit.
I was going to say hot as balls, but that works too. So, like, now you have a bright sun shining down on clear glass. Has no one shined a magnifying glass in the sun?
As you like to say, Tom, it sounds like somebody dropped the ball.
Yeah. So we have that. They're trying to get this through a vote where the politicians who are voting for this are ones that the Athletics have made donations to, because that's all fine and dandy, apparently. The Nevada teachers are launching a very public fight about this, basically trying to get injunctions to get this from being approved. The mayor of Las Vegas doesn't really seem to want them there. Basically, when they asked her about it, she gave an answer that was essentially, "We're good. Thanks, but no thanks." It's on a plot of land that no one seems to really understand how it's going to be big enough to support a ballpark, not to mention all the capitalistic accoutrement that ballparks tend to come, especially taxpayer-funded ones, tend to come with, where owners can maximize profits. And they did it in a cowardly way where they've had their social media people turn off their replies on Twitter on every post since January.
How do they expect to sell tickets, make money, build team loyalty if nobody wants this?
With everything, if the team's good, people will show up. Here's the problem. They're not coming for at least 4 to 5 years. The thing is not built yet, and construction's not even expected to start for at least another 2 to 3 years because it hasn't even been approved yet.
How long does it take to build something like that?
So I think the expectation was that they were going to be ready for it by, I believe, 2028. And so now what's going to happen is they are going to essentially wander the West for the next 3 years. There was talks about them like going to different cities. There were talks about them staying in Oakland for another 3 years, but then Oakland basically said, well, if you're going to stay here, you're going to negotiate a new lease. Everything with Oakland was seemingly done in extremely bad faith. And now what's going to happen is they're going to play in Sacramento, California at a minor league park for 3 years while this ballpark allegedly gets approved and built.
Here's my problem with that. Well, I have a lot of problems with that, but here's one problem with that. I just feel bad for these players because it's like they busted their asses. They are the best of the best, and they're being shuffled around from city to city and playing in little league parks or minor league baseball parks, whatever. It's so disrespectful to what they've been able to accomplish in their careers, but that's me.
Also, too, it's disrespectful to the fans. Despite all evidence to the contrary, they go out and support this. So what's actually happened is in the last 2 years, there's been a very vocal contingent of fans who have staged boycotts, basically trying to force public opinion to get them to force the owners to sell. You know, you walk around, you see a lot of people wearing shirts that just say sell on it in A's colors. There was an actual boycott night where 30 or 40,000 people bought tickets, and then during the fifth inning, they just chanted sell the team at full volume. In fact, there was a conspiracy theory that one of the players on the team might have been sent down to the minors in retaliation for supporting a bar that was one of the most vocal opponents against the team moving.
That's fucked up.
Because, like, he was sent down despite the fact he was doing very well, and people started sending out conspiracies that he was wearing bracelets that were made by this bar, and that's the reason why he was sent down. All of this seems very far-fetched, but also kind of not. Especially, like, there's stories that came out that basically said the stadium workers in Oakland couldn't look for work, and if they said anything about the relocation, they could get laid off without notice. Like, it was just, this all seems extremely petty and vindictive, and this is all done to try and go somewhere that will give them basically handouts. Also, they get to be in Las Vegas because, you know, gambling.
Is selling the team still a possibility or no?
They're not going to sell the team. Basically, even though they claim losses, they've probably doubled or tripled the team value by just holding it and sitting on it. So they're going to go to Las Vegas, and they're going to get to be kind of high rollers, and they're going to get to keep doing the same things they're doing, but they're going to do it in a completely taxpayer-funded stadium, probably. What a country.
Yikes.
I mean, and this is not unique. I could go into a whole story. The Coyotes are about to move, and that's kind of a similar thing. So I can go into, this is just kind of played out, and it's kind of what sports ownership is now, which is just, there's no bond between a team and its fans anymore. It's just the bond between an owner and his real estate portfolio.
I don't fully disagree with you there, but you got to look at a city like Philadelphia, where I feel like the bond is pretty strong between the teams and the fans.
It is, but when also too, when these owners start feeling like they're being not disrespected, but when they start looking at other places and they're putting in sports books in the stadiums, and they're putting in hotels and restaurants and revolving observation decks where they can just sell, especially sell to high-end people with disposable income, and they can do it on a huge plot of land out in the suburbs somewhere where they can also monopolize the parking and basically make sure that they're the only game in town. And, oh, by the way, this is all taxpayer funded. Like, it just doesn't really matter. It's always sad to see fans lose a team, because that just kind of sucks. I feel for the fans, I feel for the players, and I also feel for the stadium workers and the staff, because they're losing their jobs just for basically a power play.
What are they going to do with the Oakland A's stadium?
It's going to sit empty now. My guess is, I think Oakland, the city's going to buy it back and tear it down, because it is decrepit. There are toilets overflowing in the dugout, and raw sewage leaking down from the ceiling. I mean, it's legend that how kind of miserable the place is.
The sewage is legendary.
But it's sad, and it's going to be really weird to not have the A's in Oakland anymore. But then again, the A's used to be in Philadelphia.
Many years ago.
Many, many, many years ago.
So the next one that we want to talk about is the Edmund Fitzgerald episode. which is one of our most popular episodes, which I am kind of blown away by, that people were very receptive to it. And I don't know, it seems like everybody kind of loved it as much as I did.
Our niche is really crashes and crimes.
So this isn't an update per se, but in that episode, I mentioned a story about how another freighter that was similar to the Fitz broke apart and the stern section of the boat just kept sailing on its own, to the horror of the crew members in a lifeboat who thought that it was another ship that could rescue them. So I did a little more digging, and that freighter was the Daniel J. Morrell, and it had an eerily similar story to the Fitz. The ship also got caught in a severe storm on the Great Lakes and vanished in November of 1966, 9 years prior to the sinking of the Fitz. Again, these November storms were no joke. It took about a day or so for the Coast Guard to realize that the ship was missing when it didn't reach its intended destination in Minnesota. There was no distress call made prior to the sinking, and this ship was only one of 2 ships in the storm's path that day, and the other one survived despite having a crack in its hull. The Morrell broke in half while battling the storm, again similar to the Fitz, and the stern continued to travel another 90 minutes after the breakup. Now, another report that I saw said that it was 3 hours, so I imagine that it was somewhere in between there. 4 crewmen managed to get into a lifeboat and later observed the stern section of the Morrell just still plodding along. Only one of those 4 crewmen survived, a man named Dennis Hale, and he was also the sole survivor of the wreck itself. Hale recounts that the Morrell, quote, disappeared into the darkness like a great wounded beast with its head shot off. He was in the lifeboat for 37 hours before being rescued. Like, I can't imagine that. It's November, it's late November, on the Great Lakes. You're in this lifeboat. 3 of your crewmen are still in there deceased with you. Like, that just seems like a nightmare to me.
And did they say, like, when he tried to get rescued, that they saw, maybe I heard that wrong, so that half of the ship was still sailing?
Yes.
Like, that had to be so freaky to see half of a ship just puttering on.
He said that it was a really, scary and weird thing to see.
To be in the lifeboat with people, that's horrible.
He was probably haunted by that the rest of his life. And he actually passed away. I want to say it was in 2015 or so. I read that in one of the articles as well.
How can you not think about that anytime you go to sleep?
Now, the Daniel J. Morrell sits at the bottom of Lake Huron in 220 feet of water, which is more shallow than where the Fitz is. The bow and the stern section are located about 5 miles apart. Now, I do want to show you a couple photos of the wreck. Now, I do want to say that there were 28 other crewmen, and I believe they were able to recover 26 of them. The other 2 they haven't been able to find. But it's just really, and you can see too, kind of as we were just talking about things growing on the ship. Do you see all that?
Yeah, because it almost looks like fuzzy, like furry. Those are the rusticles, right?
It's a little bit different on the Great Lakes because it's freshwater compared to saltwater. So I don't quite know. And actual fun fact, the rusticles was, I believe it was Robert Ballard that coined that. So that was specific to the Titanic. That's inside. I think that's one of the kitchens. They were able to get inside the ship. They weren't able to get inside the Edmund Fitzgerald. So the photos from these, again, we'll post this on our YouTube and our socials.
That's pretty intact.
That, I think that's the engine room. How crazy it looks pristine.
That's extremely preserved considering it's been shipwrecked for years and years and years.
And last one, those are all the gauges. So pretty wild, right?
Maybe, I don't know if you know, how far did the stern go before it finally, the other half of it? Because he said they found them 5 miles apart, right?
They said it was 90 minutes to up to 3 hours. So it's at some point in that it finally, it's crazy that it was able to go on so long, being broken in half and not taking on water quickly enough just to sink it, you know?
I don't understand how it would have been, unless it was big enough, the ship was big enough that half of it could float on its own.
And maybe it could, just the weight distribution, I don't know. But it looked very, very similar to the Fitz, if you remember what the Fitz looked like. It was a little bit smaller. It was shorter in length than the Fitz was. But so if you can imagine what that looked like. Now, what's kind of sad, but also interesting to me is that the Fitz gets so much more attention than the Morel. Like, I had never even heard of the Morel, and I feel like I know shipwrecks pretty well. And this is also despite the Morel sinking first. Now, I don't know about you, but I think the easiest explanation is attributing it to the Gordon Lightfoot song, which brought the story to a wider audience that, you know, could understand what happened to the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's just, I guess I struggle with, it's a shame that, like, why does it seem like the Fitz's crew gets more attention and you know, I guess sympathy, and the Morel people don't even know about?
Well, I think it's just, you know, how pop culture shapes our society. I mean, that even goes back to famous line from Who Shot Liberty Valance, when, you know, when you can't print the fact, print the legend. The legend becomes the fact. I mean, again, we go back to the 1700s with Paul Revere and how that's been remembered, I guess, in pop culture, despite the fact it was, quite frankly, a pretty small part of the Revolutionary War. It was just something that was shaped by pop culture. If Gordon Lightfoot or someone else had sung about the Morel, then we probably would be talking about that and not the Edmund Fitzgerald. You know, pop culture has a way of shaping our perception of things and how we remember things and what gets remembered, really more than anything else.
Well, we want to take a moment to remember the 28 crewmen of the Daniel J. Morel.
And with that, we'll go on to another fun subject, which is Nickelodeon. We were trying to hold off on that episode until the Quiet on Set documentary came out, but obviously we uploaded it before, and then soon after Quiet on Set did come out, that 4-part documentary on HBO. If you know a lot about the story and about some of the people we talked about on that episode, you kind of already know. We don't have to rehash it. You know what happened, and you know things were as horrific and out of control as had always been kind of rumored for years. And not long after, Dan Schneider, who's kind of in the middle of all this maelstrom, tries to rehab his career and comes out and says, you know, I had never, you know, I had nothing to do with any of this. All of it is fabrication, it's lies. And now, actually, in the last couple of days, he's filed a lawsuit for defamation, saying that the filmmakers defamed him in that documentary.
I really hate that piece of shit.
I mean, that seems to be the prevailing thought. You know, one of the things that came out of the documentary is that we now know one of the child predator's victims, because it was the first time he had talked about it. And like everyone in the story, it's a very complicated thing, because while it does not excuse what happened to him, he also then went on to do a lot of shitty things himself. And so there's really not any sort of closure in any of it. It's just a lot of sadness, unfortunately.
I think the good thing, if there is a good thing to come out of this, is that I think he was able to share his story, which makes it easier for other people to share their story. So I think if that helped any other victims in any way, I appreciate that.
I do. And again, it doesn't change what happened. It also doesn't excuse what he did after that. And it doesn't excuse kind of the cycle of abuse that resulted from it. And we'll just kind of leave it there. But like I said, the new thing that's come up is Dan Schneider filing this lawsuit and basically trying to get back in to television, which is one thing that comes off in the documentary, is that, not to mention the fact that he literally tries to sneak in sex jokes into kid shows and jokes that when you're a kid you would go, "Oh, that's kind of weird," and now you see it and go, "Holy fucking shit!"
Which I feel like we talked about a lot in our Nickelodeon episode. Yeah.
I mean, we did it. Then they did one. And I'm like, "Holy fucking shit!" Now we get to this defamation suit, and this is going to be interesting because, and granted, I don't, I haven't had a chance to read through the entire civil complaint, and so I'm not sure what kind of the end game, and obviously, his legal team knows what kind of end game they're looking for here, whether it's monetary or otherwise. But I just don't know how this is going to go well for him.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we started recording that, again, you're the lawyer, but I always felt that defamation suits were really difficult to prove, right?
Well, and they're really difficult to prove when you're a public figure like he is. And that's kind of by design. So when you are a public figure and you sue someone for defamation of character or slander or libel, and if I remember my law, I think libel is the written defamation, slander is verbal. Either way, when you have any of those, you have to prove what's called actual malice, which is that the publisher, by publisher I mean whatever outlet or medium said or wrote the libelous material, knew it was untrue, knew it was fiction, and published it anyway. And that is an extremely hard thing to prove unless there's like a paper trail, and unless there is something that would show actual malice. If he was able to clear that hurdle, then there's other steps he'd have to show, but that's the first hurdle, and a lot of public figures don't get over that first hurdle. The other part of this, and this is where I think this could get really interesting, is if the filmmakers don't get the case thrown out right away. Usually what they'll do is they'll file something called either a motion for summary judgment or a motion to dismiss, basically saying that there's no grounds for a claim. Those are two different kind of things, but they get filed pretty often. That basically says, based on what was filed in the complaint, no reasonable person could find that, or no reasonable jury or finder of fact could find that, could rule in their favor, in the plaintiff's favor. Usually those don't get granted, but there's going to be discovery and there's going to be depositions, and depositions can be very broad. And we've seen a lot of examples of things coming to light publicly and people having to admit things publicly because they were put under oath at a deposition. That's kind of a double-edged sword because the defense attorneys are going to have opportunities to ask him about some of these things and what he knew, because they're going to be trying to form a basis that there is no defamation, and he's going to have to be upfront and truthful about that. Otherwise he's sworn in. If he lies, he's perjured himself. That's going to be very interesting if it gets that far.
Do you know if or when this could go to trial?
I'm assuming it's going to be, well, regardless of whether it's in state court in California or if it gets moved to federal court, it could be months, if not a year, before it would get through the discovery phase, because there's going to be a lot to discover. There's going to be probably hundreds of pages of documents and multiple depositions and multiple witnesses that would have to be taken. And that's even after going through all the pretrial motions that you're going to go through in a case of this magnitude. So, I mean, it's going to take a while to work its way through the system. It's going to probably take at least a couple years.
And as we said on our episode, the frustrating and sad part is that these were shows about kids, for kids, by kids. And you would just think that there would be, I don't know, an extra layer of protection or an extra layer of some adult in the room that is looking out for this shit. Like, I know that predators are very sneaky and they have very specific ways of doing things, but like, I don't know. It's just so sad.
Well, and this was all created because the guy at the head who should have been the adult in charge wanted control and wanted his kind of like, basically wanted to be a frat house. You know, he wanted to be the cool guy. And as a result, he created this atmosphere where the conditions were right for this to happen. He's not the only one that let this predator on the sets. A whole part of why this happened was this guy had kind of weaseled his way onto and kind of insinuated himself onto sets all over Hollywood. I mean, this wasn't just a Nickelodeon problem. This was a Hollywood problem. But Dan Schneider is responsible. And regardless of what transpires going forward, he's the one that's going to have to live with that.
I don't know if somebody like that cares, though, that maybe the only thing that matters is avoiding responsibility.
Well, and that and power and money and prestige. It's obvious one thing that comes through in this documentary is that basically having control over a set and his legacy was really the only things he really truly cared about.
I know we talked a bit in the episode that we did how, I mean, Nickelodeon is not very popular anymore. Like you said, I think they have that like kids football thing. That's probably one of their biggest things right now. Do you think that after this documentary came out and now this defamation case, like what happens to Nickelodeon now? Like, does it further tarnish their reputation and the name?
I think it tarnishes it for people of a certain age. You know, I think people of our age who wanted the look of Nickelodeon fondly, I think it's going to be hard for us to look at it the same way. You know, I think someone who is 15, 16, 17 years old who doesn't really have any emotional connection to this or wouldn't have seen any of those shows that he did or that he created is not going to think about that the same way. You know, they're going to think about it the same way like we would think about a show like The Munsters or, you know, The Addams Family. Not to say that, you know, this happened there, but I'm just using that as an example of we're so far disconnected from it that we have no emotional connect. It's not like as someone who's 10, 11, 12 years old grew up watching all that or grew up watching the Amanda Show. And most, you know, they maybe see one of them pop up and they go, oh, who's that? And then you have to explain to them that basically at one time Nick had a Saturday Night Live show for kids that basically ran them into the meat grinder. I don't think it's necessarily going to harm its reputation now. It's going to harm it for people that remember those shows. It's going to harm it for people like us because it's going to be, I'll be honest, it's going to be very, very hard to look back at any of those shows the same way, especially since like he would insert himself into some of these shows too. So it's very, very hard to think of it and separate him from any of it.
So the next one I want to talk about is also one of our more popular episodes. And of course, it was the one that took us 3 tries to record, as we said numerous times in that episode, was Action Park. Now, there are no new updates to Action Park. It was still terrible. But as I was putting together our YouTube video for that episode, I was looking at videos and photos of Action Park when I found another YouTube video of an explorer who visited the water park in my hometown, the one that I talked about on the episode. And at the time, it was very much abandoned and has since been torn down. But it was this incredible, like, blast from the past, and it almost made me cry, honestly. It made me very emotional, just seeing it up close again. And I remember as they were walking through the entrance, like, and they had all these signs of, like, instructions and rules of what you had to do. And I just remember standing there, like, waiting in line to, you know, to get my ticket and to go into the park. So it was so cool to see that again. But it was also really sad because it was in quite a horrendous state. And I really have to say that the lesson I learned from watching it was I do think the park was a little bit closer to how Action Park was than I initially remembered it. I think I kind of idealized it more than I probably should have. The way the slides were set up, and like there were these wooden stabilizers that were in water, which like wood and chlorine water, like not great. And the slides were not the most well constructed. And I do remember, and seeing the footage kind of reminded me, in the later years, they put this like lifeguard tower in the middle of the pool that was like right by the rope swing. And swimmers could come like dangerously close to hitting that thing. So I'm like, okay, that was a lot like Action Park, where you had to hit a certain spot to be able to drop safely. Now, this park was just a tiny little water park in a small town, and nothing like the scale of Action Park. But seeing it again like really made me more concerned about the safety risks of it. And we certainly didn't feel that back then, though. It was just fun, and I kind of get like that's probably how the kids at Action Park felt.
Have you ever seen people that like do YouTube videos of going through like the abandoned malls?
I've seen those, and there's also one, I will shout him out. His name is Ethan Minnie, I think. He does like abandoned mansions, and it's incredible. They're so fascinating.
The abandoned malls one for me is wild because it's something out of like a zombie movie set.
It's creepy.
It's these massive structures that are just kind of encased in time in a very different age. Like, I forget where it was. I think it was Voorhees, where they went through the mall, and there's like 2 stores now, and they moved the city hall into the mall. The courts, I think, in Voorhees, New Jersey, are like in the mall next to the food court.
Criminal court is next to Burger King.
I think civil court is now where the Arch Julius was. But it's kind of wild to think about. I mean, I guess that's one way to repurpose it, since the towns all own these properties. It makes you think we put a lot of money into shopping malls, and now we just don't use them anymore.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some statistic out there about like the number of square footage nationally that are just abandoned when it comes to malls, you know?
It does depend on where you go. Like in Texas, malls are still very big, and malls still get a lot of traffic. But like you go around the area where we are, and I mean, it's pretty dead.
So I think kind of looking back at that, it was really just eye-opening. And maybe it was, again, a product of that time where, as we said in the episode, the safety regulations weren't like they are today. And not that there was nefarious intention, at least at the one where I grew up, but I guess there wasn't as much attention to that.
I don't know if we were necessarily as litigious.
True.
Or at least I don't remember it that way.
No, I don't either. So go check out our episode on Action Park on YouTube. There's a lot of photos and videos so you can see firsthand what it was like to go there. And I did include a couple shots from my water park in its heyday. So they're in that video as well.
So our next one is not really, we didn't necessarily do this specifically, but it is an update. So you remember that we did the Office episode about the dinner party episode, which is one of my favorite Office episodes. Although my favorite might still be either the fire drill or the 2-parter Pro-Am Fun Run Race Walk for the Cure. And it's been in the news recently. In fact, I believe it was last week, where I texted you something and you just wrote me back, "What the fuck? This is going to ruin it." And that news was that apparently they are going forward with a reboot of The Office.
I very much stand by that sentiment, that it's just, I don't know, The Office means something to me and to a lot of people that's really special, and it got us through a difficult time. It got us through COVID, whatever. We identify with the characters, and I don't think you can recreate that. And if you're going to reboot even just the idea, like, I just feel like that's going to ruin the legacy of the show.
I mean, I would agree. Now, from what we've seen, we don't really know much about what the show is going to be. Basically, all we know is that there's something in the works and that Greg Daniels, the creator, is involved. And he's putting together a room of writers. Now, this was all delayed when the actors and the writers went on strike last year. So that pushed everything back. So things will probably be a lot further ahead than they are now. But right now, all we know is that there's going to be a reboot. It sounds like it's going to be with new characters and new storylines and not just a rehashing of the original Office, the original American Office. As someone pointed out, that makes sense since a lot of those characters left Scranton at the end of the show. There'd have to be some kind of mental gymnastics to try and find a way to write them back in. So it sounds like there's going to be a reboot with new characters, allegedly, if you believe the hot sheets, the Hollywood tabloids. There have been two actors cast as part of the show, and that's all we know at this point. I don't know how I feel about this. Like right now, we're in a kind of reboot culture because it's easy and it plays on people's emotions. And it kind of tugs at their heartstrings. And also, too, it's like an easy buck because it doesn't require an original idea. It's basically just a rehashing of something else, and you can basically just milk the IP for what it's worth.
But I think you would agree, 99% of the reboots of older shows, movies, whatever, do not do well.
There's a reason why everyone pretends that the Netflix seasons of Arrested Development did not happen. Paramount is trying their damnedest to make the Frasier reboot a thing. It is not a thing. I watched one episode. It's fine. I mean, they're doing their best. You cannot help the fact that John Mahoney died and that half the writers either died or moved on to other projects. It's very hard to make a show that's just Kelsey Grammer and a bunch of people.
And again, like, it's so hard to recreate the magic of the original. And that is so hard to come by itself. Just having this iconic show which everybody loves and remembers and rewatches, it's so hard to get that as it is. But then to try it again with something that was successful, like, it's never the same.
Well, and I think wasn't Harris Whittles, wasn't he part of the original writing team? You're not going to be able to recreate what you had with those writers. You had a group of writers that really understood the characters and knew how to write for them. Or in the case of The Office, a lot of the supporting cast were the writers. Well, I know Toby was a writer, was one of the writers. Ryan, wasn't he one of the writers too?
BJ Novak, Mindy, yeah.
They were part of the writers. I mean, I go back to Frasier. A lot of the writers from the original Frasier show go back to when he was at Cheers. So they had written the character for already 10 years when they started writing the spinoff. So it is very hard to recreate that. And it just feels like you're trying to just milk the IP for what it's worth because it's a way to make an easy buck.
As we're talking about this, I'm remembering an Office Ladies episode with Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey. And they were talking about one time that Steve Carell had this idea that if was picked up by like writers, producers, and Greg Daniels was on board, that it was this idea that would get them all back together in one place and they could have a reunion episode and the two of them were both on board for whatever this idea was. So I guess that never came to fruition or anything. Like, I'd rather watch that than this stupid reboot.
If you did a movie, you know how much money, like, you wouldn't even have to put it in theaters. You put it on Peacock, like what they did with Monk or Psych, and people will watch it.
I would pay for a Peacock subscription to watch that. Yeah.
Like, you do a movie with the original cast, you let them cuss as much as they want. It'd be like a 90-minute Office episode, just R-rated, like, or PG-13 rated. You'd be great.
That would be phenomenal.
Then you can send those characters on their merry way. Then you can almost kind of use that as a transition to a reboot.
That would be a smarter idea. Yeah.
Or you can just flesh out the whole Threat Level Midnight movie.
I would watch that too.
Especially since John Krasinski's an action star now. Just make the Threat Level Midnight movie and people would watch that too. But it's Greg Daniels, so it's not going to be horrible. But I feel like people are going to watch like 2 episodes of it and get really disappointed because they're going to be expecting one thing and then it's going to not be that.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to let you watch it and then you tell me how it is.
It's going to be the meme. It says, instead of me saying shut up about the Suns, it's going to be shut up about the reboot. So if we have any Office fans who listen to the podcast, let us know. What do you think about this? I don't necessarily know if there's going to be a lot of Office fans that are going to be thrilled about this based on what I've seen on social media, but we want to hear from you. Let us know on our YouTube page, on our Gmail. Let us know your thoughts. We always love to hear from you.
So our last update is from our TLC episodes. Because I'm such a big Sister Wives fan, I did want to mention the update of the unfortunate passing of Cody and Janelle's son, Garrison Brown, in early March of this year at the age of 25. It appears that he was struggling with depression and alcohol addiction for a while. And upon hearing the news, there was mostly an outpouring of support for the family by fans of the show, which was really lovely to see that. Although some did take the opportunity to berate Cody and his last remaining wife, Robin, on social media. And I just have to say that I'm not a fan of those two is an understatement, but whatever you feel about their family dynamics, one, we don't know the whole truth. We're judging them by what we're seeing on a show. And two, to blame them in any way publicly is not really productive or helpful in any way. And even if you think that they may bear some responsibility in Garrison's state or how he was feeling, they still lost a son. And I think that we all need to respect that. Now, I watched some YouTubers and podcast snarkers, and they were mostly respectful of this. And they really backed off their content about the family for a while. And now that some of them have restarted their videos, you really see that there's this awareness of the tragedy, and they certainly talk a bit more respectfully about the family and the show, and that is good to see that I think we still have some humanity left in us. But I just wanted to mention the unfortunate passing of Garrison, and I do wish their family well and healing in that.
Absolutely. And a lot of times we only know these people from what we see on social media or on TV. You don't know what somebody's going through in the dark. I think it's important to kind of keep our humanity because we can all relate to what that pain would feel like.
And I think that's just a good point in general, and something that I try to remind myself of, when I get frustrated with people or out in public or whatever. It's, you never know what somebody else is going through. So I all think that we need to be a little more kind to each other. So if we can do that, I think we'd all be a little bit happier.
Agreed.
So before we close out, we just wanted to mention what our best episodes have been and what our favorite episodes have been. So as of now, as of May 2024, our top episodes are Enron, Edmund Fitzgerald, and Game Show Scandals. So Tom and I joke a lot about it, that we are just blown away that Enron is number one, and there's so much interest in that, but we did have a lot of fun making that one.
Crashes and crimes.
And I think what we really want to continue doing is covering some more of these scandals and these corporate crimes, and there is not a lack of them in history. So I think we're going to start to weave some more of those into our episode topics.
We've heard you loud and clear. We want crimes. We want crimes.
Now, Tom, I want to know what some of your favorite episodes are. I think of mine, I really, really enjoyed the Game Show Scandal episodes. It was 2 parts. It was a lot of information. It was some pretty heavy stories, but I really liked telling the history of the evolution of game shows and getting into some of those stories. So that was one of my favorites that I've done. And of course, as I mentioned, Action Park, Edmund Fitzgerald, I love doing those. And the surprising one to me was the McDonald's Monopoly scam. I didn't realize I was going to love that one as much as I did. I think the story is super interesting. So if you guys haven't heard that one, go check that out for sure. And of your episodes, I was skeptical about the Great Maple Syrup Heist at first when you mentioned that one as a topic, but after we got through it, it was such a great story that I love that one. You did a great job with Greg Daniels. That was one of our early ones. I thought that was fantastic. And then our most recent one about Centralia, the ghost town in Pennsylvania, was really, really fascinating. So those are my favorite of yours.
I mean, the Action Park one was fun. The one that you guys actually heard was great, but the first two that we tried to record were fun.
What's interesting about the Action Park one is that you got so incredulous about some of the rides and what happened at Action Park that even by the third recording, you still brought that intensity to it.
So to let you guys behind the curtain, so I heard for a week, I heard from Laura, don't read anything, don't see anything, don't watch anything. I want you to just listen to me as I tell you this for the first time. And it would have been amazing if that first recording had made it out into the world.
It was pretty good.
It was very good. That was probably my favorite of yours. That and the McDonald's candle.
I like the twist at the end where I threw the curveball at you if I was going to tell you who the informant was. I love putting that in there.
My favorite, Bill Barocco was good because that's a very interesting story. The Enron one was fun too. The one I probably enjoyed the most was the Maple Syrup Heist. Like when I was watching the Netflix documentary about it, I couldn't stop laughing. Like it's not funny, but it's kind of funny. You have all this basically seriousness over maple syrup. So that was probably the maple syrup one and Bill Barocco were probably my two favorites to do. And like I said, my favorite of yours is I think a tie between McDonald's and Action Park.
They were both crazy stories. So to reflect on our journey so far, so I think you and I can both agree that our first episodes were a little bit rough as we were getting used to the recording and the editing, but I think that we've gotten to our groove since then. It's definitely gotten easier. I don't know what you think.
Those first couple episodes were kind of hard to get through, just in terms of trying to get everything together. And one of these days, I'll tell you a story about the squeaky chair.
Oh God, your fucking squeaky chair! It's like the third co-host on our podcast. You guys just don't usually hear it because I edit really well. So as we've mentioned the last couple episodes, we are slowly putting up our episodes on our YouTube channel, and we're really trying to grow that as well. People seem to be very responsive to the shorts, and we want to, like I said, keep putting out as many as we can. So please go and check out our YouTube channel and subscribe, like our videos. That would mean a lot to us.
And we say it every week. We appreciate the views we get on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and we're going to be trying putting up more of those. We do have the full episodes up there, but like I said, we have noticed that you guys are liking the shorts more, so we're going to be trying to be really good about getting more shorts up there when we can to make sure we're constantly kind of refreshing stuff up.
And we always say a lot too. We have this great little community that listens to us every week, and we appreciate you guys so, so much. And we still want to continue to grow. So please share us with your family and friends, like us on our socials, share our videos, share our audio episodes. So please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Tell Me About Podcast. Our YouTube channel is Tell Me About Podcast. And send us comments and episode suggestions to the Tell Me About Podcast at gmail.com.
Can't see it, but I'm making the heart sign with my fingers. Millennial kind, not the Gen Z one that looks like shrimp.
So we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode.
Have a great 2 weeks, everybody.
Bye.